Hi guys, Political Junkie 2414 here, and I'm wishing y'all a happy holiday. Merry Christmas to all of you who celebrate. I will be releasing this on Christmas Day. It's currently Christmas Eve right now, but today, after a very after a prolonged release, I'm finally going to be discussing my predictions for the 2024 Senate and House elections and how accurate I was in both of these chambers. Now, I made a video a couple of weeks ago talking about my accuracy in the 2024 presidential election, and that did not go so well. I mean, I predicted Kamala Harris to win around 287 electoral votes, I believe. She won 226. I got 5 battleground states wrong: Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Nevada, and Arizona. But when it comes down to the Senate and the House, I was a lot more accurate. In fact, I only got one Senate race wrong, and I only got 9 House races wrong. And we're going to be talking about each of those today. For the Senate, I will give you the big picture about if these races, because they're less to cover. It's a bigger picture, or a smaller picture. But the House is massive, so I'm only going to be talking about the ones I got wrong. So we'll start off in the Senate. Republicans, as expected, won a 53 seat majority. This was not the Republicans won a majority, but and that was not unexpected because Democrats were defending free states in Trump territory: Ohio, West Virginia, and Montana. West Virginia was basically gone for Democrats after Joe Manchin announced he wasn't running for re-election, but he would have lost anyway. I had this seat as safe Republican, as almost everyone did. But Montana and Ohio were a little bit more up in the air because Democrats had incumbents running, John Tester and Sherrod Brown, who had both won re-election 3 times before, had won election here 3 times before this. But there was a different expectation going into it this time, especially for Tester in Montana. Tim Sheehy, who seemed to have a slow start. Tester had a very strong start in this state in early polling, but around the springtime, it really collapsed for him, and he never really recovered. I moved this down from likely R in my second to last prediction to lean R. I think that was more out of an abundance of caution, but I was still very confident that Sheehy was going to win this race, and he won it by 7 points, which honestly, considering Kamala Harris lost the state by, I think it was 20 points. Let's look at the presidential race here. Harris lost it by 20, so Tester overperformed by 13 points. So if Harris had gotten Biden's 2020 numbers, if she only lost by 16, Tester would have only lost by 3 in this Senate race. Oops. So anyways, I don't think I ever explained. This is my prediction. These were my predictions for the Senate elections in the margin versus the actual Senate election results. And then you can see a lot of similarities here, but mostly, it's, you can see I was only 1 seat off. I had Democrats winning 48, and they won only 47. That's because they lost Pennsylvania, which we'll talk about in a minute. But you can see generally this map is redder. Or, the final results are better than what I was expecting, but not terribly. Montana and Texas are likely red. Wisconsin and Michigan are tilt blue instead of lean blue. Ohio is lean red instead of tilt red. Pennsylvania is tilt Republican instead of lean Democrat. But aside from that, and New Jersey is, of course, likely Democrat instead of safe Democrat. Going through all of these states, we kind of touched on Montana and Ohio. Ohio, Sherrod Brown lost by about 3.5 points, which honestly was a pretty respectable margin, all things considered. Again, Trump won the state by roughly by 11 points. That's an 8-point. That was a 7.5 point shift, which is what most people were expecting. And again, had the circumstances been different, perhaps Brown would have been able to win if Harris only lost the state by 7 or 8 points, or come a lot closer. But Moreno, not a perfect candidate. I still think he didn't run a great race, but I predicted him to win. I do think I went into my final prediction video actually thinking Brown. I would pick Brown to win, but I think it was some of the polling there and just the general vibes that I had been seeing in recent days that kind of made me, double, made me think twice. And I'm glad I did that because I was really thinking about it and just, I made the right call in picking Moreno to win. Michigan, Wisconsin. What's interesting here is Tammy Baldwin was the best performer out of these three Rust Belt states for Democrats. She did better than Elisa Slotkin or Bob Casey. I thought she would do worse than either one of them. But Eric Hovde ran a pretty strong campaign, really surged in the last weeks of this race. But Baldwin seemed to recover in the last week or so, and she was able to win. This was the closest state on the presidential level for Kamala Harris, or for either candidate. It was the closest state in the nation, and it had one of the closest Senate races. And Baldwin, I think, was really able to get higher turnout up in Dane County, really cut into more of the margins, and get good margins in the WOW counties, keep and do better than Harris ever could in some of these rural working class communities, albeit not by much. Hovde kind of just ran as a typical Republican. I think his whole non-stance, his refusal to take a stance on the farm bill or agricultural issues, in Congress. Wisconsin's a farming state. I don't think that helped them, and I kind of thought that going into the election. Baldwin also just had a history of overperforming. And this is a far cry from her 2018 win, but she still won, and she's still the interesting thing about this map is that we were talking beforehand in 2016 and 2020. There's only one between 2016 and 2020, there was only one Senate race where that went for the party that lost the state on the presidential level, and that was Susan Collins in the state of Maine. I'm sorry, I keep flipping back a lot. I don't really know where I'm landing. I guess what I'll do here, as I was saying, there's only one race, between all the Senate elections in 2016 and 2020 where the party that lost the state on the presidential level won the Senate election, and that was Susan Collins winning re-election in the state of Maine in 2020. This year we had four. We had Jackie Rosen winning in Nevada while Kamala Harris lost. Ruben Gallego winning in Arizona, which she lost. I mean, all these were Democrats overperforming Harris, and then Wisconsin and Michigan, of course. And then in every other state voted the way that it did on the party level. But it was pretty impressive because it shows Democrats just had a really bad performance at the top of the ticket, which dragged them down in the House and Senate races. But in some cases, it wasn't enough. And Republicans, if they had gotten, a perfect streak, if they didn't have any split ticket states, they would be at a 57 seat majority in the Senate right now, which would be pretty outstanding. And that would have really, that would have given this very unfavorable map. That would have really set the Democrats back for possibly decades in the Senate. I mean, this is definitely, Republicans have a healthy majority in the Senate, and it's going to take, Democrats probably 2 to 3 cycles to win it back. I really doubt that they can do it in 2026, barring some massive blue wave, which is possible, but I think it's going to be a little bit, I don't think we're going to get a 2018 style wave. It will be Democratic leaning, though, more likely than not. But the Senate always takes longer to flip than the House from the party in the White House. So either way, not an awful result for Democrats. Oh wait, we need to talk about. I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm sorry. I'm recording this like 8:30 at night, and I've been wrapping Christmas presents, so I'm a little tired. Jackie Rosen won despite Harris losing the state by about 4 points. And this, Nevada had pretty bad turnout for Democrats in the Senate election, or in the, in this election cycle. And that was apparent going into the race. There was something very different. Democrats they weren't building up that firewall that they usually were. They were trying to, defeat a GOP firewall, which really was a bad sign. And John Ralston, for the first time ever, I think, was wrong about, how Nevada would go. He's you all know who John Ralston is. If you don't, look him up. He's a very he's a very trusted voice on Nevada politics, but even he was wrong about Harris winning the state. She lost it. But Rosen was consistently overperforming Harris in the polls. There were times when she was up by 9, 10, sometimes even like 15 or 20 points. This race really, though, in the last weeks kind of came together for Republicans. Sam Brown, I wouldn't say ran an awful campaign. He ran actually a pretty good one. I think he was bogged down by some of the extreme stances he had taken when he ran against Adam Laxalt in the Senate primary in 2022. But overall, he had an inspiring story. I just think Jackie Rosen had a unique appeal to Nevada voters, and it was it was predictable. It was a predictable race, but again, another close Nevada race. 2 years, 2 election cycles in a row. We get Catherine Cortez Masto, Jackie Rosen both coming out nearly on top. Arizona, this was a shocking one, and not in the sense that Ruben Gallego winning was a shock. But just when you compare it to the presidential race, I mean, this was a 7-point ticket split. Donald Trump demolished Kamala Harris here. I was very wrong in the state on the presidential level, but in the Senate and House level, I was spot on. So, I mean, the fact that Arizona, a state that's so soundingly rejected Kamala Harris, voted for Ruben Gallego just goes to show how strong of a candidate he was, how organized his campaign was, and it was. I mean, he launched this campaign in January of 2023 before months before Carrie Lake announced, more than a year before Kyrsten Sinema announced she wouldn't be running for re-election. He was ahead on this, and there was speculation even before that he would run, and he was very committed to getting Republican voters and moderate voters, and he was just ahead of the game on this, and he really shed his progressive ideology to really, embrace a more, moderate brand. And I think that he ran a good campaign, and Carrie Lake was really bogged down by some of the issues she had in her past, gubernatorial campaign, and she tried to moderate as well, but, with less success. So Arizona, very interesting. Michigan, this one, Democrats got really lucky. Elisa Slotkin, she's a great candidate, and she won this race. But really, there was an undervote in this state compared to the presidential race, more so than other states. There was a total of like 5.6 million votes. There was a total of 5.7 million votes in the presidential race, and that's more than usual. And if Slotkin got less votes than Kamala Harris did in this, state, in Michigan, and it's kind of surprising because Mike Rogers honestly was a lot closer to Trump's number than Slotkin was to Harris's number. So, it was pretty shocking. Democrats kind of held on here by a thread. And I think it goes to show just, that they got lucky with Slotkin. Not that she's a bad candidate, but Mike Rogers ran a good campaign. This was a race that I think was being swept. I always said was being swept under the rug. I thought that it was more competitive than people were giving it credit for. But Slotkin in the end pulled it out. So Debbie Stabenow will be succeeded. Debbie Stabenow's seat will remain in Democratic hands. And then finally, just to cap it off, Texas and Florida were much better than I thought they would. Ted Cruz, though, really underperformed Colin Allred, or really underperformed Donald Trump, and he won the state. Trump won the state by like 14. Cruz only won it by like 9. So again, similar situation to Ohio and Montana. Better top line number for Democrats. They could have had a chance in this race, but I think Allred ran a decent campaign, not like Beto O'Rourke style, but it was okay. And then Nebraska was pretty close, honestly. That was, around a 7-point margin, a little surprising, but again, we saw a lot of data that was suggesting that race would be close, but I won't waste any more time so that we can get on to the House races. Just going to talk about the race that I actually got wrong, and that was Pennsylvania. Bob Casey losing, I mean, wow, this really, I still am processing this because I knew it was possible. I had, been examining, I remember even in early September, I was noticing a shift in the data. I was noticing a lot of, warning signs for Casey that this race was getting closer, to the point that I never really thought that it would be. I was pretty convinced. I mean, Casey won by 13 points in 2018, and yeah, that was a blue wave, but he had won by substantial margins in all three of his past Senate elections, and including in 2012, which again was a lot more of a split ticket race, but he overperformed Barack Obama by 4 points, and this time he barely overperformed Kamala Harris by two. And there were signs of the gap closing, and McCormick, was doing better on the air. He also just had a lot more money than some of these other Senate candidates. I mean, Wisconsin, Michigan, Nevada, Arizona, just the fundraising kind of dried up for those nominees, whereas Ohio, Montana, Pennsylvania, they were really just, not even Montana, it was mainly Ohio and Pennsylvania that were getting, that were being milked by GOP donors. And Casey, I think, ran a decent campaign, but again, I think he got dragged down just by Donald Trump's appeal to Pennsylvania, and that translated to the House races as well, which we'll talk about in a minute. But just, I mean, the Casey family is such a dynasty in Pennsylvania, and to see, the son of the former governor, Bob Casey Sr., who really was, the face of that, dynasty, of that political dynasty, go down. It's very, very it's very interesting and just shocking to see. But Dave McCormick, he's finally getting his shot after losing to Dr. Oz in the 2022 Senate primary. He beat out an incumbent. I don't know if he would have won against Fetterman. I think the top line number for Republicans with Doug Mastriano in the 22 governor's race was just too much to overcome. But he certainly would have come closer than Dr. Oz would have. And Bob Casey, I think, just got really unlucky here. But very, very close race, closest race of, Senate race of the 24 cycle. But let's move on to the House, because I've spent enough time talking about the Senate. So overall, much better map than 2022. I got Nevada and Pennsylvania wrong last time. I got just Pennsylvania wrong this time. So don't trust me on the Keystone State, because apparently I just can't get it right. But yeah, let's move on to the House, where I only got 9 races wrong. I got, I think, 16 races wrong in 2022. And I did predict the House majority wrong this time. I did say Democrats were going to win 220 seats to Republicans 215. It was the other way around, exactly. Republicans won 220 seats to Democrats 215. But overall, I mean, I was pretty spot on with a lot of this map, and a lot of the errors that I had for this election cycle look very differently from the ones I had 2 years ago. So we're going to start off, we're going to go east to west. So starting off in the aforementioned Pennsylvania, I was wrong about Pennsylvania 8 and Pennsylvania 7. Both of these had Democratic incumbents, Matt Cartwright in the 8th, Susan Wild in the 7th. I'd predicted Susan Wild to lose in 2022, and I was wrong about that race. Like a lot of people, she shockingly won re-election, and she was looking in a good position to win this race. I was really shocked to see that Ryan McKenzie pulled it off. I thought, during the final days of Biden's campaign that maybe Wild would go down, but I mean, she was, I think Susquehanna or Muhlenberg College released a poll that had her up by 6. I mean, I was pretty confident that Wild was going to win here. I mean, she had been soaring. I was more concerned about Cartwright's district than anything, because that was a Trump seat in 2020. I think it was like Trump plus 4 or something like that. Not even that, Trump plus 3. It voted for Trump by 9 this time, and Cartwright only lost by about 2 points. And he has a unique appeal to the district, but he just wasn't able to overcome that top line number, and I think that's really what cost him. This was a race that I think a lot of people thought that would be closer than 2022. I had Pennsylvania 7th as lean Democratic, and I had Pennsylvania's 8th as tilty. So I was kind of cognizant of that. But overall, and I was right about that in particular. That the relation between these two, but really, I mean, they were both. This was like a 1.6% margin. This was just a 1 point margin. It was really, negligible. I mean, they were basically the same. They were a lot closer than I thought they would be. So yeah, 2 races wrong in Pennsylvania. Iowa, this was another one. So what made me think that Zach Nunn was going to lose here was the Seltzer poll. I didn't believe that Kamala Harris was going to win Iowa. I thought it would be a lean red state. I really wasn't confident that it would go to Harris. I was very skeptical of Seltzer's poll, which felt weird to say at the time because they had been so accurate, but just seeing the numbers, it was like Harris 47, Trump 44. There were, I believe it was like 9 undecided, 9% of the electorate undecided, and it didn't feel like a good Seltzer poll to me. Something about it felt different, and just the fact that Harris is winning Iowa just felt, it's not that like Seltzer has never was never on to something that other pollsters weren't, but this felt just kind of out of place with everything that we knew. And so, but I did think that Democrats were going to win one of these House races back, and Lenin Bakam, I think is his name. He was doing, he seemed to be doing well in, the forecasts, and, Nunn only won this against Cindy Axne in 2022 by like 0.9%. I mean, it was very close, and it was a narrow Trump seat. I think in the end it voted for Trump this year by 5. So Nunn did underperform, but, it turns out that this race was actually the one to really watch in Iowa, and, Sabato's crystal ball kind of picked up on this when they made Marionette Miller Meeks' seat lean Democratic. They were still wrong about it, but they said that Nunn would win and Miller Meeks would lose in their final prediction. So kudos to them. I thought they were kind of crazy, but overall, a Trump plus 8 seat, the one that Miller Meeks occupies, was closer than a Trump plus 5 seat, the one that Nunn occupies. So overall, Iowa, I think it was just really that Seltzer poll, and that was wrong by 16 points, which was insane. I figured it would be wrong, but not by that much, given Seltzer's near perfect track record before that. Then going on to the state of Nebraska, we have Don Bacon's district. This was one that really surprised me. Not that Bacon did better. I think really what doomed Tony Vargas here was the fact that Kamala Harris only won this district by like 4 points. I mean, it was just really, really an underperformance from the polls. I mean, the polls in Nebraska second. We had consistent CNN, New York Times, Siena College, Emerson College, just all these polls showing Harris winning the district by double digits, whereas Biden only won it by like 7 in 2020. And Bacon was losing to Vargas consistently by 5, 6, 7 5, 6 or so points, and it was just, I had it as lean Democratic. I didn't think Bacon was entirely out of it yet, but I mean, this really goes to show, that, and I know again the top line number is relative, but I think it really frustrated Democrats in particular because Vargas was a pretty decent candidate who did a very good job in 2022. And this was a race that I was almost spot on in back in 2022, and so to have it, go wrong again was, to have it go wrong this time was very surprising, and I think that it just shows how much of an institution Bacon is in this seat, and whenever he retires, I think Republicans are going to have trouble here, but again, House seats, House races in California are better down ballot, House seats up in Michigan, in some of the working class areas, like Michigan's 8 for blue are down ballot than they are in presidential races, so things can get wonky. Now, Colorado's 8th. This is another one I got wrong in 2022, again, but in this opposite direction. I thought Yadira Caraveo was going to lose in 2022, and she ended up winning. This time I predicted the opposite, and Gabe Evans won, and I had this race a little bit closer than I think a lot of people did. I think I saw some people putting this as lean or even likely D. I only had it as, I had it as tilt D, so, kind of a moral victory in that regard, but I was still wrong here, and I think what happened was, I haven't looked at the results from Colorado as in depth, but I think one thing that I remember distinctly about the 2022 race was that there was a libertarian that some predicted siphoned votes off of the Republican nominee Barbara Kirkmeyer, who only won 47, roughly 48% of the vote, whereas Caraveo got 49%. So overall, This time there was less of an independent vote. I mean, there was like a 2% going, whereas I think in 22 it was like 4 or 5%. So Republicans had conservatives had a more unified vote here, and I think that helped. And also Colorado like only voted for Harris by 11 points, whereas it voted for Biden by like 14, which still Colorado voting for a Democrat by 11 points would have been crazy just like 10 years ago. But still, it's it was a reduced margin, and you saw in the other race that was super close in 22, at Lauren Boebert's former district, Adam Frisch lost by 5, which was a less surprising result. I was pretty spot on there, but still, quite interesting. And so then we're going to go down to the last free here. Actually, not the last free. We'll go to Alaska first. Alaska, I had this going for Mary Peltola. I had it as a Tilt D state or seat. I mean, it is an at-large congressional district, but Nick Begich came back in the rematch, came back for second go-around, got the nomination. The other candidate on the Republican side, Nancy Dahlstrom, dropped out, endorsed Begich, got the Republican vote surrounding him. And Peltola, I mean, I was a little surprised to see this massive shift from 22, but I think what happened here was just in 22 you didn't really have a typical Senate race going on here. You had the Murkowski versus Chewbacca race, whereas where two Republicans were expected to face off against each other, and did in the final round of ranked choice voting. So there was kind of a wish-wash. It wasn't like there was a typical top line in the midterms. And the truth is, Peltola, I mean, like, Harris lost Alaska by 14 points. It was a lot more than a lot of people were expecting. I thought she would lose it by like 7 or 8. And so Peltola did like 11 points better than Harris, but that wasn't enough. And I think that Democrats it's another example of, rural voters in some of these in these traditionally conservative states may like a Democrat like Mary Peltola, but they like Republicans more. And I think that that's something you kind of saw in states like Montana and Ohio. The extinction of the red state Democrat, really, or not the extinction, but the almost, the borderline extinction. It's pretty close to extinct now in Congress, but of course, wacky things can happen in politics. So that happened in California. These free seats, so I got 2 of these wrong. I got California's 27th wrong, or sorry, I don't know what I'm saying. I got all 3 of these wrong. George Whiteside's here. This was not shocking to me, per se. I had predicted Mike Garcia to win, and basically the conventional wisdom was that he was going to lose in the last little bit, but there were some people still betting on him, and I was one of them. I had seen Garcia overperform in 2022, and how he overperformed Trump in 2020. Now, this seat's like voted for Biden in 2020 by like 13 points. I was looking at the data, or the apparent data for the congressional district results. Harris only won it by 3, so Garcia really just matched Trump here. And Whitesides ran a very good campaign. He had a lot more money. He was outraising Garcia by like $4 million, if I remember correctly. And I mean, he ran a very strong campaign for the suburbs. He was like the former director of NASA, or some NASA sub program, or subsection. And Garcia, it's just like kind of the inverse of Alaska at large. Voters in these, in these seats, that go, voters in, traditionally Democratic, suburban seats, or Democratic suburban seats, like, Republican like Mike Garcia, but they like a Democrat more. It's all about, who do you want most in government? Who do you really prefer? And that's why, you saw Democrats come home and moderates come home for George Whitesides. So I think that's what happened here. Now California's 41st here. I predicted Ken Calvert to lose this district. There were some mixed opinions about this district. I don't really think there was a consensus here. I think all the major forecasters, like Sabato's Crystal Ball, 538, they all had Calvert winning narrowly. But I think some of the political YouTuber, predictors had this race going for Will Rollins, myself included. And, he still had a pretty good result here, all things considered. I mean, this is a seat that has trended left in recent years. Voted for Trump by 1 point in 2020. I think it voted for him by like 5 or 6 points in 2024. So Calvert did underperform here, but again, he's a long-time incumbent, and I did have Marcy Kaptur winning, in my 2020 in my election, and I think I used her, long, her extremely long tenure as part. I think I mentioned that when I was making my case for her, and I kind of ignored that with Calvert. So I do apologize for that inconsistency. I think Calvert, I was just more convinced that that he was going to lose. I think that there were more signs there. I think he was more likely to lose, and he actually ended up, in a much, having a much more clear victory than Kaptur, whose race, wasn't called for days and days. I think it took a couple weeks actually to call it, but either way, a loss for Democrats, but again, not an unfamiliar one. Because they've lost to Ken Calvert several times, and sometimes in landslides, sometimes in very close races, but still, building upon what they had in 2022. But the final race here, California's 45th, I remember really deliberating over how I wanted to characterize this district. I think it was the last race I decided before I started airing my final House prediction, and I was on the cusp of giving it to Derek Tran, but I chose Michelle Steele out of incumbency, and I regret it. But Tran here really pulled it off for Democrats. This was like a Biden +6 seat in 2020. I think it voted for Harris by like about a point, so not a lot of ticket splitting here, but Steele, she ran it up here in Orange County, barely won Orange County, and Tran won the slice of Los Angeles County that was in here, and it was just enough. I think he won by 600 votes. Yeah, 653 votes, I think, is the difference. Fact check me, or check my math. But this was a very decent night for Democrats in California and New York. New York, again, you can see I got 4 races wrong here 2 years ago. I got every race in New York right. Even New York's 19th with Josh Riley and Mark Molinaro, which a lot of people thought Molinaro was going to hold on. But I got that right. So, you can see here that the results and the differences and the mistakes that I made in 2024 were very different than I made in 2022. And overall, I think I had like a 98% record with the House, with my accuracy in the House elections this year. I'm very proud of that. And I think I think it was only it was 96% in 2022. So this is overall an improvement for me. So I'm very proud of myself for that. Even if I didn't get the majority right, I was still very close to the number of races that I got right. And I was right about the, composition, even, just in the wrong direction, 220 to 215. I just had it the other way around. But I think in the Senate, it was like 94% accuracy in 2022, and this time it's like 97%. I ran the numbers. I think you can see it in my, my about section, the about section on my channel. But I think I wrote something like that. Either way, thank you guys for watching. I'm sorry that this video took a while. Again, not running, running on fumes here. But thank you for following me throughout this journey. This is my last election video of the 2024 election cycle. I will probably make another video or two before the end of the new year, but wanted to let you guys know I'm going to take some time off for a little bit. I will be back. This is not me saying I'm gone or anything, but I'm not going to be posting super early predictions for 2026 until maybe midwinter or even the spring. I need some time to just kind of relax. Life has been very tough recently, and I just, and I feel bad. I kind of have been waiting for this election cycle to be over, as, not only so I can move on to the next one and, have some new fresh material to work with and ponder, but also just so that I can kind of take a step back for a moment to just kind of reassess some things that are going on in my life. And, I'll be back soon enough. And I just wanted to let you guys know. I wanted to thank you all for being so supportive over the last couple of years. But I'm just going to take some time off. And I'll see you all, in 2025. This is not goodbye. Again, this is just goodbye for a while. But I will be back, and I promise that. So thank you all so much for watching and for supporting me. Hit the like button if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Share this video with someone who you think would enjoy it. And I'll see you guys next time when I talk about all things politics. See ya.